having a vice chair if I can't do this, you know. So let's go ahead and I'll call the meeting to order of the Vision Zero Street Safety Committee. Thank you for all of your time for being here this afternoon. First item is approval of the minutes of the April 20th, 2023 meeting. That was our first meeting. I just had one, I think, revision on the minutes, and then I'll ask if anybody else has any revisions. It has Julian as listed as absent. I'd like to amend that. Julian was present at the meeting for the entire time. He was just kind of put in a different, I don't even think it was a different room, but he was there on the call the whole time. So I think it'd be fair to move him as being present for the meeting because he was there. With that, are there any other discussion or amendments to proposed amendments to the meeting minutes?
I was kind of taken back by the brevity of the minutes. I know we were into some pretty lengthy conversation and a lot of stuff. I mean, I know it says we engage in conversation. I don't know if comparing it to like the other minutes from other boards and commissions, it just seems kind of brief, but especially considering the topic. But anyway, I don't know if anybody else noticed that, but that was just an observation on my end.
Thanks, Dan. Any other discussion or proposed amendments on the meeting minutes? With that, I will entertain a motion. And if anyone's out there to do a motion, if you'd say motion to approve the meeting minutes as amended, I would appreciate it.
A motion to make to approve the meeting minutes as amended for April 20th.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, hearing none, it does pass. Going into the next item is the director's update. This is an information item.
Thank you, Vice Chair Armas and members of the committee. I have a few items I just wanted to update the committee on. The first being on May 31st, the council took action to be able to amend the bylaws or to amend the city code on how often and frequent this group can meet. So we did adjust it so this group can meet more frequently. The meeting we're having tonight, actually, because of the ordinance, is a special meeting, but because it does take 30 days for those code changes to actually go into effect. So going from this point forward, we'll be using the modified code to be able to handle our meetings. I will tell you, when it comes to, I know we're going to talk a little bit more about the bylaws in the next agenda topic. And so we'll get a little bit more into the charge of this committee and talking a little bit more about that. And Brianna will talk about that. But for what I wanted to mention is a couple things. One is the frequency of the meeting. So wanted to be very, very frank with the committee. I know there was a desire to meet more frequently quarterly, and I think we are prepared to do that. However, I don't, as a staff, we are not probably in a position to be able to staff a committee meeting monthly, but I would like to be able to suggest or propose that we meet every other month. I would remind the committee that we have two other committees that are part of the Vision Zero overall task force, an executive body within the city, but also a staff level working group that are meeting as well. So we have those going on simultaneously with this committee as well. So we do want you to be heard. We want you to be engaged, and we want to be able to get input from you. We just we're not going to be able to support it at monthly, but we can definitely meet every other month. And I think that will give us enough time to be able to take the work of this committee and the recommendations and the actions of this committee and work through them and to have meaningful agenda topics coming back each time we have an opportunity to be able to get together as a committee. The next thing I wanted to mention is, and we'll get into this probably a little later as well when we talk about the agenda item 7, which is the approval of the meeting schedule. We did do a poll out to committee members about their preferences on meeting in person versus virtual. And we got mixed results. So some did prefer virtual, some preferred in person. And the majority actually preferred the virtual, but so I think what we will move forward and that's something I guess the committee can decide on, is going with a hybrid option where we allow both in-person and virtual participation in order to be able to maximize the participation of all committee members. It will take us a little bit of time. We're working behind the scenes to be able to find a location where we can have both virtual and in-person options. And so that's something we're working on, and hopefully be able to have something for the next meeting for the committee. And I know we'll probably talk about this later, but our target is to have the next meeting most likely in August. So the next thing I wanted to mention is, as we talk about some of the things that with this, the committee is working on, that are going to be worked on, that we're going to be talking about, and some of that is what we're going to be talking about on the agenda this evening, is what we're looking to be able to start implementing the road safety action plan. And I would just ask, if you have any questions at all about the road safety action plan. I know it is a big document to take in, but it is based on 41 strategies that were adopted by council, and using those 41 strategies to implement the road safety action plan. And so we are obviously first off going for those 41 strategies and talking about those. And so a lot of the stuff that we're bringing to you and we'll be talking about with you are going to be in the lens of those 41 strategies. Next thing I wanted to just mention to you, some progress kind of things on some things that are related to the work of this committee. We were able to get council approval of our active transportation plan. That is a document that kind of sets a lot of policy and framework related to how to make sure that we have a good quality active transportation network within the city. It is the evolution of what we had previously, which is our comprehensive bicycle master plan that was adopted last in 2014. So with council approval of the active transportation plan, that really does put us in a position where we have a much stronger policy document, guidance document going forward, and how we work with developers, our own projects, and to make sure that we're thinking first and foremost how to bring about a safe, comfortable, active transportation network. And I think that is very complementary to the work of this committee to have that active transportation plan. And I did want to mention, because of the kind of the length of the agenda for tonight's meeting, we did take off the active transportation plan presentation. We will have that as part of the August meeting, if that's the next meeting, a presentation on the active transportation plan. So we will provide a full presentation on that so that the committee is very much aware and understands what's in the active transportation plan and its purpose. The next thing I wanted to mention was another good news is, in the last few weeks, we also, as a department, activated our 86th Hawk pedestrian signal. The Hawk signals, as many of you may know, is a big part of our pedestrian safety efforts to make sure we have safe crossing locations in between our traffic signals and in some of our signalized intersections. And so that 86th location is actually at 41st Avenue and Thomas. And we have a number of other Hawk signals that are underway right now, but that was something we were able to accomplish here in the last couple weeks. And next thing I wanted to mention was yellow light timing. So some of you might have heard that we had a presentation to our city council about yellow light timing. That was a effort that we've been underway for about a year, doing a study, or working on formulating a study and performing a study to see if we were able to extend our yellow light time, which is the yellow clearance interval between green and red, if that would help make our streets safer. And we did a comprehensive study working with one of our university partners at University of Arizona to be able to look at if we were to try this extension of yellow light timing at 12 of our intersections, what impact that would have. And what we presented and shared with our council last week was that we were actually able to see a 30 to 60% reduction in red light running at those intersections before and after we implemented the signal timing changes. And so we got approval from council to move forward with retiming all of our signals, all 1,200 of them, to be able to extend those yellow light timing. There was you may or may not have heard, there was a additive motion at the same time, in where the council members asked us to also do some homework over the summer to look at automated enforcement options. And as many of you may be aware, we used to have a red light camera program, and we also had a school zone speed enforcement program. Both of those went away in 2019. So there was interest among the council to be able to move forward, at least with studying and looking at what would happen, what it would take to be able to bring that back. And automated enforcement, it would be a tool that would help us address some of the road safety issues we've got on our roadways, especially when it comes to red light running and speeding. And so I'm not forecasting how it will go because it wasn't that they did not give approval to start a program up again or anything like that. We're just going and doing some of the research behind the scenes to be able to bring back, hopefully later this year in the fall, with some information for the council to consider if that program was to come back, how it might come back. And then I think the last thing I wanted to mention is we are busily working on our Safe Streets for All grant, and we have a presentation on that later in the meeting. And we're working towards a July 10th due date for that, which is very much heavily focused in our high injury network, which we'll also talk about a little bit later in the meeting. So those are the items I wanted to bring up to speed the committee on. And I would be this. I know it's only for information only, but if there's any questions, I can at least voice them, and we can work on maybe talk about them for future agenda items or anything like that.
There's a lot of information there. So I see a question already from Jay. Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I have a couple of questions. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great. Katie, just a quick question or two about the yellow light timing study. You may not know the answer to this off the top of your head, but I was curious after reading the report. When the yellow light times were increased, where was the extra time taken from? Was it taken from other green time? Was the cycle extended? Do you happen to know how that was?
The cycle lane time was extended.
It was. Okay. And also I noticed with the most recent report, as opposed to the one that came previously to council, there was a little less data in terms of some of the specifics. Are we able to get the background data that informed the decisions and the charts and all of the stuff that was in that?
So Vice Chair Hermes and Committee Member Bieber, that was a question that was asked at the council meeting, and we're working on finalizing, getting the report all finalized so we can actually push it out onto our website, so it will be available to the public to review.
Okay, so
I don't have a date on that yet, but that we'll make sure we keep you informed on that.
Right, and also all the background data and everything will be in that larger report, is that? Okay, great, thank you. And then one final question regarding the automated enforcement. In terms of the direction that you were given, what is it exactly you're going to be doing in between now and bringing something back to the council? What is your direction? Are you just talking to vendors? Are you thinking about different things? What are you bringing back to the council?
I don't have quite all that information right now, but I know we're going to be doing a deep dive, probably looking at different peer cities, looking at other programs, hearing some of the concerns that was voiced back in 2019 when this program was not extended. But I have staff already working on that to kind of put together a multi-discipline, multi-department team internally to be able to start working on this. So it's a little early. It's just a week out. So I don't really have all the details for that, but it is something that we're going to be, like I said, I think I want to be able to provide as much information as possible to council to consider and figure out where they would like to go from here.
Yeah. And so will there be an opportunity for this group to discuss it and weigh in either before or after you bring it back to council and anything is acted upon?
Absolutely. I think that's something that maybe not before, but probably after because I think we'd probably want to share and talk with the council since they're the one that provided direction about the item. So we would definitely be able to come back here and provide a presentation on what we discussed with council and, maybe what we heard from them as well.
Well, just to follow up on that, and I don't want to jump on anything inappropriately, but I mean, I would think that the members of this group would want the opportunity to know what's going on and weigh in on this as well, because once it's brought to council, if there's a motion taken at council, then something can happen, and obviously that train can leave the station before this group has an opportunity to look at that issue as well. I mean, we can certainly agendize it on our own for discussion, but I don't necessarily think we need to duplicate efforts.
Jay, you took the words out of my mouth there. I think it's, and especially reading the bylaws, I mean, it's very much right within the sweet spot of our duties to recommend policy changes, to recommend ordinance changes. So I think it's very appropriate for us to get that information, about enforcement, about school zone enforcement. It's a big thing that I hear all the time. People driving way too fast in and around our schools. So I think I would just echo that, Jay, what you said about let's use the committee for what our council charged us with, which is making recommendations for changes to make the city safer. So appreciate that sentiment.
Sure.
Joe, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, can you just one quick, and you may already be looking at this, but when you do your due diligence on enforcement, I would suggest you determine or identify other cities that have done away with the program and then brought it back, similar to what apparently is being considered here at Phoenix. I think it'll probably tell a story that's consistent with Phoenix. And I think it would just provide additional support for some policy changes as a result.
Yeah. James, I saw your hand up. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, now the red light camera enforcement was specifically taken out of the road safety action plan when it was approved by the council. I remember that was taken out the day prior. Does that affect the ability for the city to research this, or do we have to go back? Does the city have to go back before the council for an approval to start researching that?
Vice Chair Ermis and Committee Member Farley, no. If the council has the ability to direct and act however it sees fit, dependent or independent of the road safety action plan priorities and strategies.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, Addie, go ahead.
Thank you. Kitty, you talked about changing the lights and the timing. What is Streets doing about implementing leading pedestrian signals?
So I don't have a problem with answering. I think I would just say that we just provided an update to the to our economic and downtown equity subcommittee, EDE subcommittee, earlier this month and on the 13th. And so we just did a presentation on downtown pedestrian safety, which included information about the leading pedestrian intervals and scrambles.
Could you share that information with us, Keeney, or maybe an email?
Yes, we can definitely provide you a copy of the report that we provided.
Thank you. Okay, I just had one question. Okay, I see a question here. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, Kenny, I think I heard you reference at least two different reports. And I'm just curious, in looking at the street transportation website, it looks like there's a lot of different documents out there that collectively tell us what the city's plans are for things traffic related. Is it safe to say that all of the reports that would inform us what the city's plans are can be found on that one website? Or if not, could we be sure that the committee members have copies of all of the relevant plans?
Vice Chair Hermes and Committee Member Scott, we have a general list of things that we know from a plan perspective, but I know there are a lot of plans over many, many years, some more relevant than others. But we can work on trying to put together a comprehensive list of that and provide links of that wherever they reside on the city website, because some are within our department, some are in other departments like the Planning and Development Department, some might be in other citywide sites, but we can try to put together a list of the different ones in there. But yes, we can definitely provide that information to the committee members.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions, so I have one last question that kind of dovetails with that one. You mentioned the 2014 Bike Master Plan, and I think you said evolution, and maybe you'll get into more of this next meeting, but it's not till August, so I want to ask you now. You said the active transportation plan is an evolution of the 2014 Bike Master Plan. But it's still the plan, and I'm using the word plan a lot, but it's still the plan to build out the 2014 Bike Master Plan and those. I know we haven't built it out yet. We've still got a lot of work to do. It's still the plan to implement that and to build out that bike infrastructure that's set forth in the 2014 bike master plan, right?
Vice Chairman and members of the committee, I would probably just characterize it probably better to wait for the August presentation, because I think one thing about the active transportation plan that we focused in on was a more comprehensive view of active transportation, not just specifically about projects, because we've actually implemented more bike lane miles since, ended up for the city than was actually included in the original comprehensive bicycle master plan. So you got to realize also, since that time that was adopted, we actually had Transportation 2050, which had a goal of 1,080 new bike lane miles, things like that. So there have been a lot of implementation of bicycle lanes across the city, but we'll definitely cover that aspect of it within the presentation in August.
Okay. Abby?
Yeah, sorry, Vice Chair. I want to clarify, Kenny. I'm talking citywide pedestrian leading signals. Do you have any data on that? Like, what are streets doing with citywide leading pedestrian signals? Sorry, I wanted to clarify that.
I would suggest we probably cover that on a future agenda topic. Because I know we're getting pretty lengthy in just the director's reports here, but not that we can definitely share that information
Well, it is
when it comes to.
Yeah. Very important.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Agreed. Thank you,
Quick
Abby.
question.
Dan, go ahead.
I just wanted to know, with like the school zone enforcement and the yellow light timing, there's with the other plans that come into play here. I'm thinking, safe routes to schools, complete streets, BRT, all of these things are going to be coming into play. Is there a plan, or is there some type of framework in place that when this comes, that all of these plans will be amended at this, basically at the same time, and that eventually this will be implemented citywide? Because I'd be curious to know where the bike lane, miles you've added, where those have been focused, if they've been in underserved neighborhoods, or if they're primarily downtown. I mean, we want transportation to be equitable across the entire city. So if we're going to be doing this, I think we need to take a look at it and make sure that it's being done equitably across the city. I don't think somebody who lives in North Phoenix or in South Phoenix should not have the benefits of having these plans being implemented if they don't, just because they don't live in the downtown core or something like that, or Central Phoenix. But is there kind of a framework that will kind of like tie all these plans in together so they're implemented somewhat in a cohesive manner across the city?
Vice Chair, Committee Member Penton, I will just let you know when we talk a little bit about the August active transportation plan briefing update, when we provide that to this committee, we'll actually specifically cover the fact that, how we took into account these other plans that are existing already and making sure they were coordinated with the update to the active transportation plan.
Okay. Well, thank you, Kenny. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions, I am going to go on to overview of the Community Advisory Committee bylaws. Brianna?
Excuse me for a minute. Can anybody hear me?
Oh, I can hear you. Yes. Who is this?
This is Tom Callow. We gave up on video. I had to call in.
Hey, Tom. How are you?
I'm fine. Why don't you continue to run the meeting, since it's easier for you to do than it is for me on the phone? But I'm here. I heard all of that. I don't have any way to raise my hand.
Okay, all good. Just feel free, if you got questions, just blurt them out, and I'll make sure you get those answered. But I'll just keep trucking along. We are
Okay.
on talking about the committee bylaws. Brianna?
Thank you, Vice Chair Hermes. Good evening, committee members. So I know last time we ran out of time and weren't able to cover all of the bylaws. So I just wanted to quickly go through each of the sections and just make sure that nobody had any specific questions related to it. So obviously this is the Vision Zero Community Advisory Committee. And so the purpose and formation of this committee is to provide feedback and recommendations regarding the Road Safety Action Plan to both the implementation team as well as the Vision Zero Executive Task Force. So I assume there are no questions related to what the purpose information of this committee is. Perfect. Next, I want to quickly cover just the membership. The membership of this committee consists of 11 voting members who are residents of the city and who are appointed by each of the council districts, with 3 of them being appointed by the mayor's office. The committee will also include non-voting members who are City of Phoenix employees from the city manager's office, the Phoenix Police Department, and the Street Transportation Department, and that the committee will also include non-voting youth student members appointed by the Street Transportation Director, and that the youth members will be at least 17 years of age. The committee shall annually elect one of its members to serve as the chair and one member to serve as the vice chair. Anything?
Yes, Brand, I had a question about that. I know last meeting we did a vote on vice chair. We have not yet done a vote, this is only our second meeting, of the chair. And I know that bylaws require that annually. I know Chair Kahlo, I'm not quite sure how that happened or how Chair Kahlo happened, but I just wanted to ask that question. I want to make sure we're in compliance with our bylaws, I guess is my point.
Vice Chair Hermes, I think for the initial selection of the chair, that was at the discretion of the mayor to be able to select that. Going forward, though, that will be something per the bylaws that the committee will be selecting on an annual basis per the bylaws.
Okay, yeah, I think that's important, probably do that at our next committee meeting to make sure we're complying with the bylaws. Abby, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I was also wondering what you asked, Vice Chair. Could we consider voting for a chair in this meeting and possibly consider re-voting for Vice Chair if Ed Hermes is nominated as chair instead? Would that be an option?
Vice Chair Hermes, members of the committee, that is not agendized, and with the selection of the appointment of the chair by the mayor with the first initiation of this meeting, Chair Kahlo will serve as the chair until the year is up, and then this committee will be able, in a position to be able to select the next chair.
Okay, thank you, Kenny.
Yeah, it's just a little strange under the bylaws, and I'm not trying to take anybody's position or anything like that, but vice chair and chair are treated the same in the bylaws, but not treated the same in reality. So I'll leave that comment there. Brandon, I don't see any other questions. I'll kick it to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Vice Chair. So the next section is the terms of office removal and vacancy. And so a committee member shall serve a 2-year staggered term. And in order to create these staggered terms and ensure continuity, members appointed by council districts 2, 4, 6, and 8 shall initially serve a term of 1 year. After their initial term, all members may serve an additional 2-year term. The term of any member automatically ends if there is a death of the member, submittal of a written resignation, removal from office under Phoenix City Code Section 2-51, failure to attend 2 consecutive regular meetings of the committee, the absence of any member for 2 consecutive regular meetings of the committee shall render any such member liable for immediate removal from the committee. Removal shall be at the discretion of the Street Transportation Director. Vacancies for an unexpired term shall be filled by the respective council district or mayor. No committee member shall serve more than 2 consecutive full terms, together with any partial term which is less than 2 years due to vacancy. And any member shall serve the unexpired term of a vacant office before the committee member's term officially begins. Each youth member will serve only a 1-year term with the possibility of appointments to serve a second 1-year term. Any questions related to that section?
I don't see any.
Perfect. The next section is meetings and quorum. So 6 voting members shall constitute a quorum for the exercise of the powers and duties conferred upon the committee. The affirmative vote of a majority of the voting members present at a meeting shall be necessary to take formal action. The committee shall hold meetings as needed, but not less than quarterly. So this is the modification that Keeney talked about that just went to council and will go into effect 30 days from the May 31st meeting. Special committee meetings may be called by the Street Transportation Department Director, Executive Task Force, or the Roadway Safety Action Plan Implementation Team. And any questions related to meeting and quorum?
Got a question from Jay. Jay, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I'm just wondering, maybe this is not the right section to ask this question, but does the bylaws allow for this committee to create subcommittees to like investigate certain specific issues or whatever? Like if we wanted to set one up on, I'm just going to pick a name, bike lanes. I don't know why we would do that, but just let's just say we wanted to come back with some recommendations on something specific rather than have everybody kind of be involved in that. Is there anything in the bylaws that allows for us to be able to kind of create a subcommittee to report back to the full committee to be able to do work in between our meetings?
Vice Chair Miss and members of the committee, it's nothing specific in the bylaws that say that you can or cannot do that, but I think we can consult with law department on that to be sure, but I think it is permissible for this committee to establish a subcommittee for a specific period of time or specific purpose, especially as it may relate to an agenda topic that you want to dive deeper into. I think it would probably first have to be agendized and then, form a subcommittee out of that. But we'll go back to our law department and get that question responded.
Yeah, if we could just get a report back on, whether it's allowed and what it would take, what the proper procedure would be, we really appreciate that.
Thank you. Brianna, I had a quick question. I see, and I think he mentioned it earlier too, that executive task force. What is that and who's on it?
So the executive task force is an internal group of executives. And so a lot of the respective departments, I believe we've identified 8 to 10 departments that have a role in the implementation of the Road Safety Action Plan. And so a lot of those will be either the director, assistant director who are setting on those. And this committee is led by the city manager's office, which is Alan Stevenson as part of that. And so it is the executive level of the Roadway Safety Action Plan implementation group.
Okay. So it's similar to the Road Safety Action Plan implementation group. It's all city employees, and then it's the executive level of that. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's fair.
Okay. Thank you for explaining that. I don't see any further questions on this section.
Okay, the next section is powers and duties. So the duties and powers of this committee shall be in an advisory capacity only. The committee shall have the following powers and duties: review quarterly updates from the Roadway Safety Action Plan implementation team, provide feedback and recommendations regarding the action plan to both the Roadway Safety Action Plan implementation team and executive task force, request future agenda items, and coordinate with related city council offices. Any questions regarding the powers and duties of this committee?
I have a question. Yes. About my responsibility about this. I would like to ask if is that okay? Am I allowed to request, for example, or with District 5, which is my area, Old Maryville is big. So I would like to be more, I would like to have more information, the boundaries, how big it is, because I'll be taking decisions. I'll be a place that I don't know. I would like to know more about the place because it's humongous from 96 something Avenue into like 27th Avenue, and I'm more focused in the middle of Maryville. So to me, it's really important to know the area. I mean, is that okay with you? If I can ask the District 5 to see the necessities of the community. I know there's a lot of things that we need in Maryville, but is that okay with you? Because I would like to be more informed. What is it that I need to be more focused on? Because I know that this is road safety, but I need to know more that area.
Committee Member Menjivar. So I think what you're asking is, can you, with the number 4, coordinate with related city council offices? Can you coordinate with the city council offices as well as other community members in District 5 so that you make sure you have a good understanding of maybe the road safety concerns within the entire district?
Yes.
Yes, so I would say yes, you have the opportunity to coordinate with other District 5 community members to make sure, you know, as you sit on this committee as the District 5 representative, that you have a full understanding and breadth of the concerns within your specific council district.
Thank you.
You can, and it's very much appreciated. So, any other questions on this section? I don't see any, Brianna.
Okay, so we're on the last section, which is recommendations on ordinance changes. So recommendations and or proposed ordinance changes shall first be considered by the committee, which may receive the advice of technical experts. All proposed ordinance amendments shall first be considered by the executive task force and or the roadway safety action plan implementation team, which may receive the advice of the technical experts. The executive task force shall determine whether to recommend the proposal to city council. The executive task force may modify the recommendation received from the committee. The committee shall submit recommendations to the executive task force as soon as possible or as recommended by the committee.
Any questions on this section? Yes, Jay.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm the guy with a lot of questions. You'll find that out. But I want to clarify what it said because I'm not quite sure exactly what the process is for making these recommendations, whether it's for ordinances or changes to ordinances. Does the bylaw say that if we make a recommendation, this other executive group can like modify it on their own at will? And I'm a little confused as to what that section said or meant. And are we able to, on our own, make a recommendation? Like, let's say this group decided we want to make a recommendation for something just that isn't out there otherwise. Are we able to do that, or do we have to wait for something to be brought to us?
So, Committee Member Bieber, yes. So, as a committee, you guys have the opportunity, if there is something on the agenda, to come to a recommendation that could possibly change any ordinance modifications and or possibly develop a new ordinance that would then be given to the executive task force and or the roadway safety implementation team. At the end of the day, it will be the executive task force that will ultimately determine if it should be brought to council, and if it is brought to council, whether the recommendation stays as written or if the recommendation is modified. So they do have the opportunity to modify whatever recommendation comes out of this committee.
Dan, go ahead.
So on that note, at the last meeting, I think on the minutes for item number 11, I had made a request to but for further research about civilian creating an ordinance for civilian enforcement of hazardous obstructions in the bike lanes. Would be vehicles, street signs, anything, primarily in school zones and in residential areas, downtown, wherever. So is that something that we would have to talk, would that need to be an agendized item? Or is that something that we can request, like at the last meeting, that maybe we make the request and then somebody, looks into it or, follows up on that? I'm just kind of it's not clear what the process or how that whole process works.
That's a great question, Dan.
Vice Chair and members of Committee Member Penton and members of the committee, yes, it would have to be an agendized item for you to act on it to move forward with it, and it is on our list of future agenda items. We didn't include that from the last conversation, or the last discussion in the last meeting. So when we talk about future agenda items, we have that list that we'll be discussing.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, Julian.
Thank you. My question is to understand a little bit more about the task force. do they have any power to approve any changes, or or is everything approved by the city council?
Committee
Right.
member Cepeda, everything has to be ultimately approved by the full city council. So they can bring forward policy changes, ordinance changes, but ultimately the city council is the one who will take action.
Thanks, Julian. Any other questions? And I just wanted, oh yeah, go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, I know we can't discuss it because it's not I mean, we can discuss it, we can't take action on anything because this is a discussion item, but I just want to express a little bit of concern about how the bylaws were written and possibly ask for a future agenda item for this committee to maybe go back to the council and look at the fact that another group, you know, quote unquote, above us can just sort of arbitrarily change things that we're recommending. It's certainly fine for them to make a different recommendation, but I don't know that it's a little uncomfortable to me that this group was put together and that then some other group can say, well, no, we don't like what they said before we bring anything to council. I'm just a little concerned by that, and I just want to express that.
Vice Chair, Committee Member Bieber, and members of the committee, this is very similar to most other committees or commissions within the city, that they are in an advisory role, an advisory capacity to, you know, either the council or council subcommittees. But, you know, if that's something that the committee wants to spend time on to be able to talk about bylaw changes, we can, but ultimately it'll be up to council to be able to make any changes if this committee wants to make changes to the bylaws.
I just want to clarify that what I mean is it sounds like, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, it sounds like if this committee comes up with a recommendation, of course it's advisory. We're not the council and we don't have specific powers to implement things. But if then another entity then takes that recommendation and adjusts it, modifies it, maybe there's particular good reason to do so. But I mean, they could change it to be exactly the opposite of what we recommended. So I'm just a little concerned that before it gets to council, before a recommendation or the council hears that this committee made a recommendation, that it might be changed before it got there. And obviously that's part of the advisory capacity of the committee. And that's all I'm expressing.
Yeah, thanks, Jay. And I think you know, as we get into recommending hope and ordinance and policy changes, and you know, I think our expectation is that we'd have really open lines of communication with the city, with city staff, because if that doesn't happen and kind of what the scenario you said happens, you know, yeah, there's going to be upset folks here, and of course we always have the right to talk with our council members. But I think to Dan's point, it's really important, especially in the portion of future agenda items, we are charged with recommending policy changes and ordinance changes, and we are provided the technical assistance of the city to help do that. And that's the city council's charge to us. So I think it's really important that we get these ideas flowing, just like Dan did, and start working these things up and making the recommendations, because I think that's what the city council wants to see. At least that's how I read the bylaws. So, okay. With me off my soapbox there, Brianna, if you want to go to the next section.
Actually, Vice Chair, that is all of the bylaws. So that concludes this agenda item.
Even better. Any other general comments or questions? Dan, I see your hand up.
So I just wanted to go back to what I said when we started the meeting, when we, you know, approved the minutes. To Jay's point, when we're talking about things, these are on the record. It'd be nice to see that the minutes reflect that a little bit more thoroughly. So, you know, should there be, you know, a lapse in communication or some things in the work, at least there's somebody can get the gist of it from the minutes. So anyway, thank you for letting me bring that up.
Thank you, Dan. And Julian, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. Just very quick for me to understand something. I was looking in the bylaws, but I couldn't find it. But last meeting, we talked about some topics being confidential. and there was some restrictions of what we're able to share with the community members outside of this meeting. I don't. I'm just wondering if anyone remembers exactly the words along that a specific topic. I'm just curious because I was concerned about not being able to share the information that's being shared here with other members of the community, and yeah. So that's basically maybe can someone point me to the right direction in the bylaws, and I could take a look at that or.
So, Vice Chair Hermes, student member Cepeda, what I was going to mention on that one is I think what you're talking about is the open meeting law. This is a public meeting. So what we talk about here, you can share with people on the outside. I think the concern is if you're talking with other committee members outside of this public forum and talking about potential items that may come to the committee, is you don't want to violate open meeting law by having those discussions outside the public forum. So if you're talking generally with members of the community or other people out that you're representing or talking to, those conversations are okay. There's nothing privileged in this meeting. This is an open public meeting. You can have those conversations with others. Hope that makes sense.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other questions on this, we will move on to the next agenda item 5, which is Safe Streets and Roads for All. Grant update, Carl Langford. Go ahead, Carl.
Good afternoon or evening, I guess, at this time, everyone. So just a second here, let me share my screen and we'll get this presentation up for you guys. And hopefully you guys will see, just a second here. Okay, do you guys see the presentation at this time?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so first off, we're going to talk about specifically, so first I'll introduce myself. I'm not sure I got to last time. So I'm Carl Langford. I'm the traffic engineering supervisor here in Streets. I oversee the safety section in general here. And so first of all, we want to talk about our Safe Streets and Roads for All. Oftentimes this is referred to SS4A. This is a newer federal grant opportunity that was specifically set up, I believe it began last year. It ultimately has about $5 billion over a 5-year period for this. So it was a very big grant opportunity. One of the things implemented more specifically by the newer Transportation Secretary, Pete Buttigieg. I'm sure I'm butchering the name a little bit there. So, so this year, so we did submit a grant last year. The submittal was, I think, September-ish timeframe. So it's one of the reasons that we really pushed to get our road safety action plan implemented in time and agreed upon. That was one of the requirements to actually be eligible for this. We submitted ultimately about a $30 million grant, quite a bit of implementation funds for several signals, several rebuilds of smaller type projects, along with a couple of planning funds to it as well. So in February of this year, we did receive notice that we were awarded $460,000, not the $30 million that we requested initially. So basically just our planning aspects to it. And so with that, there were 2 planning aspects that we did. One is a high-risk pedestrian network. And the intent behind that is to really, so I'm going to talk more about our high injury network that we have for the city. And this is a lot of other cities throughout have created this high-risk pedestrian network because pedestrian collisions overall don't happen nearly as frequently as vehicle collisions do. And so from a data perspective, you just don't have as much a quantity and they're rather limited. So a lot of cities are looking more at a high-risk pedestrian network. And so that's something that as we work through the federal process to get the grant, we're going to hiring a consultant. We imagine it's going to take probably a year or so to do that study and something that will be implemented in probably a future modification of our road safety action plan. The other item also is a speed limit setting study to kind of look at, hey, we're a very big city. We have a lot of big major roads, and how do we best, look at setting speeds? There's lots of debate, I'll say, in the engineering community on what's the best way to do that. And so this is really for us to be able to hire out the consultant, look at the national and everything that's going on, and kind of help make some recommendations for us to how to best set speed limits throughout and everything. And so again, that's last year. And Kenny alluded to, we are also putting together a grant application for this year as well. The deadline is fast approaching. It's July 10th. So we're in kind of the final phases of it. And so just wanted to give you a quick high-level update. Our application is revisioning Indian School Road Corridor. So a lot of updates that we heard back from the federal government and others that did get awards versus not. We think, and again, we're thinking, the federal government won't tell you exactly what you have to do to get the award. They have a lot of people applying for this funds, even though there is a big section of funds. So here specifically, we're looking at Indian School Road. It's from roughly 91st Avenue to about 39th Avenue on here, that we're looking to say, hey, how do we readdress this? So this addresses specifically our HIN, so our high injury network. There is a lot of fatal and serious collisions throughout this corridor. It's one of the higher ones throughout the city. One of the things in the grant application, they want to look at what's called disadvantaged communities, or historically disadvantaged communities oftentimes. And so there's these federal maps. Quite a bit of Phoenix does fall in it. Obviously, there's sections of Phoenix that doesn't. And so Indian School Road is one of those areas that does more fall into that category. And so ultimately, we're looking to that. There's several items on it that will promote safer multimodal travel. It has a lot of pedestrian aspect to it, because there are a lot of pedestrian things along there. And it implements a lot of our strategies and principles for Vision Zero. And so that's something that we're pushing forward, and it's fast approaching that deadline. And so we're in the final stages of putting that together. And we wanted to give you guys just a high level update of this is what the SS4A is. It's the federal government's grant opportunity really for safety. And it's a big chunk of money that hasn't necessarily been there in the past. So, and I know I'm trying to go kind of quick because we do have several other things we want to get in our time period. So that's that presentation. So I'll turn it back to Vice Chair Hermes. Any questions specifically?
Thanks, Carl. I appreciate it. Just a quick question, and then I'll look out for everybody else's questions. But Indian School, so I just want to make sure I understand. Are you working on the plan for this stretch of Indian School, or do you have a plan? I didn't quite understand that. Could you explain that? Is there a plan right now? And if there's not a plan yet, can we be a part of that, developing that plan?
So ultimately, there is kind of a plan. It's a high level planning. It says big items on, hey, these are the things that we would update and whatnot. Due to the timeline, the drop dead date that actually has to go to the federal government is July 10th. There's not really the time to kind of go into detail with this committee to kind of say, hey, here's all the little things on what we're submitting for this plan and how this goes. And it's simply due to timing aspects of that. So there is a plan put together. It has a lot of items identified, some of the different things and safety components that happen on roadways, upgraded signals, upgraded lighting, some medians in some locations, looking at wider sidewalks. And there's several items in it. But the full design is not finalized. It's a planning level document.
And the grant, if provided, would be to implement that plan. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be it. We are shooting for roughly right now, it's a $25 million grant ask that we're asking for. That's on the high level of what they say is the range for the federal dollars. Obviously, the city would have to contribute a portion of it. We don't know exactly. One of the things we heard back from the federal aid FHWA that we had conversations with was specifically make it scalable. So one of the things is we're going out and we're saying, hey, this is what we want, but if need be, we can chunk it down into this or this or this, depending on the available funds. They may get, I think last time they said they had some 600 plus applications. And, you know, obviously that's a lot for someone to comb through and decide.
Okay. And could you chunk it up? Because I know between 39th Avenue and 16th Street is a lot of pieces of our high injury network there. Could you continue that progress to I guess it would be to the east as well, which desperately needs to be safer?
So at this point, we looked at the 25 million and kind of looked at overall what fits the criteria that they're asking for best. And that's where we came up with this section of Indian School. And so that kind of fit that 25 million. Obviously, as we present it to them, they may come back and say, hey, we're going to give you 10 million. And with 10 million, maybe we can do, I'm just throwing out, 39th to 61st. Again, no idea.
Got it. Julian, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. My question is, if the plan gets the proposal, the grant gets approved, are you able to adjust some of the things you want to implement in the area? Something that comes to mind is complete streets so that pedestrians have alternative modes of transportation. I will definitely recommend, like, if we're not able to make changes after the grant gets approved, I would like for us to have the opportunity to give some feedback on things that potentially could benefit the Indian School area.
Yeah. Vice Chair Hermes and Council Member, sorry, I can't make out your name at the moment. Apologies. So in a sense, yes, but not really. So once you put forward a federal grant, they basically tie you to what's in the grant. Can you go above and beyond if there's some funding available? Yes, but most of the times with current inflation, how things are going, more often or not, we're kind of saying, hey, 4 years down the road when we get the plan finalized and everything, it's oftentimes more expensive than anything else. And so they very much say the items that you submit in the grant, you need to hit those things, because those things you submit in the grant are what the federal government is saying, we're giving you this funds because of this list of items that you say that you're doing.
I see, thank you.
Vice Chair Hermes and members of the committee, I'd also go on to what Carl was mentioning is they do come back to us, the federal government will often come back to us and ask us whether a project is scalable. So even though we are going, a big swath of Indian School Road, which is in our high injury network, we understand that we may not get the full 25 million. So we'll be prepared to be able to answer that question if we have to live with something less. And you mentioned as well, going east of 39th Avenue, want to let you know a couple things. We have an existing build grant, which is another federal grant that we're working on 35th Avenue between I-10 and Camelback Road. So we actually have some federal funds to be able to focus in on that safety corridor already. You're probably also familiar with it. There's a bus rapid transit project on 35th Avenue that's going on as well. And then finally, there is an ADOT project to do some improvements at the Grand Avenue Indian School and 35th Avenue intersection. And so all those things are going on. So we opted with this grant request to focus a little bit west of that area, so we didn't further complicate the work of those three projects that are going on right now along the 35th Avenue corridor. But yeah, the good thing is that this section of Indian School Road is a high injury network corridor, and I think there's a lot of a narrative and story to tell for the federal government about why it's important to get the funds for this section of Indian School Road.
Dan, go ahead.
So is that also, so the ADOT's got their I-17 interchange project with Indian School with the new flyover bridges and the pedestrian bridges. Is that, how far east or west does that extend? And will that does that essentially butt up with the boundary for this grant?
The boundaries of the work that ADOT's doing at the Grand Avenue intersection won't extend to 39th Avenue.
I'm talking about I-17.
I don't know, it won't as well.
Okay, so it will only go to what, 35th Avenue? This-
I don't have the
this
plans
says
in
the
front of me
39th,
right off
I'm
the top of
sorry.
my head, but I know our team's working on that, but
Kenny, this is Bruce. I'll answer that.
Go ahead, Bruce.
If and when ADOT does the I-17 interchange, it is specifically from 27th Avenue to 23rd Avenue, and not including 23rd. It's from the west edge of 23rd up to and including 27th.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I appreciate it. So with that, there'd be like a little bit of a gap there, I guess, so with the, so like, Ed had said, is there a way kind of like build it up or, add, so there's not a gap in the improvements? That was the point I was trying to make.
No, but the other thing to realize on all these grants, they're ongoing. So if we do this one, get it or not, the next one can do the next piece. It's an application every year. So that doesn't mean there won't be other applications. So this isn't a one-time only type thing. It is in terms of this one project, but there's an opportunity to apply for these millions every single year.
Okay.
Awesome.
And kind of to the funding point, this is a question for Keeney. It's part of the Vision Zero, either, and I can't recall, it's either creating, this when the council was creating this committee, or maybe it's part of the past budget process. There were some money set aside for Vision Zero street safety projects, correct?
Vice Chairman, members of the committee, yes, there was $10 million annually allocated to the implementation of the Road Safety Action Plan. That's a bare minimum because obviously we would look to be able to use that local money to leverage that local money to be able to get federal investments as well. So if we're able to secure the $25 million of Safe Streets for All monies through this grant, hopefully we are, I'm crossing my fingers, then we would be using some of that $10 million as a local match for that federal grant. So we'd be leveraging and multiplying our local investment.
Got it. Any other questions?
I'm sorry, was this a planning grant or was this a planning and implementation grant?
It's an implementation grant.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. I don't know if you can
Go
see
ahead.
it.
I can't, with this sharing screen, I can only see a few people, so just go ahead, jump in.
Okay, this is not a criticism at all, just a suggestion that it might be helpful if we are going to sort of get an update like this that is at very high level, because I know people will have specific questions about like what's in it and what more is in there. If we could, get some of the underlying documents and stuff like that, maybe ahead of time or whatever, or at least have access to them, then we at least don't have to ask the questions during the meeting, especially because we're not going to have time at every meeting to like delve into real deep detail about this stuff. So.
Yeah, agreed. I have no idea I can't visualize kind of what it would look like if we got the grant and this got implemented. So appreciate the comment, Jay. I agree. Nonetheless, I hope we get the grant. I see no other questions, Carl. Am I kicking it back to you?
Yes, so I'll go on to the next presentation here.
Go ahead.
Let me share screen again here. Okay, can you guys see the screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so perfect. So now for this next item, we really want to talk about our high injury network, or oftentimes what we'll refer to as the HIN as we go for it. So as we put together our road safety action plan and our Vision Zero, so we created a plan to say, hey, how are we going to achieve zero fatals and zero serious injuries on our roadways by the year 2050? That's our goal, that's the plan. And so with that, you want to look at where are the concentration of these happening. And that's where this HIN, or the high injury network, comes into play. So today we really want to talk about what's the purpose, why do we have a high injury network, what are injury and fatal crashes, and then talk about some of our highest ranked intersections that are identified in the HIN, and then also some of the highest ranked segments. We'll discuss some of what we are doing currently with some of the funding that we have. We'll talk about briefly some example projects, and then kind of the future of this as well. I know there were some questions that brought up at the last meeting that we had, and hopefully we answer most of those in this presentation today. So first of all, purpose. So the HIN is really designed to identify the roads and intersections where the highest number of people are being killed or seriously injured. And so generally a serious injury, that's an injury that we think might impact somebody for the rest of their life. You know, and obviously there's huge differences in that. There might be somebody in an injury that may lose a limb. There may be somebody that might be paralyzed the rest of their life, or there's a whole gamut of stuff. So generally on a police report, a serious injury is generally when, hey, that person needs to go to the hospital immediately due to the injury. So again, some might be fairly minor, but some might be quite significant to where ultimately societal costs for that injury is probably worse than ultimately being killed in the injury itself. And so with that, there are roughly 5,437 crashes that are identified as killed and serious injury collisions. And this is for the 5-year period that was analyzed 2016 to 2020 data. That was the data we had available as we put together the Road Safety Action Plan to take to council. We'll discuss some of the data here in a little bit later as well. And so with that, I do want to, let's see if I can do this, take you guys to where you can see some of the HIN purposes, whatnot. So here we go. Okay, so I'm on our Road Safety Action website. So again, here it's at Phoenix.gov /road safety. So this is generally where our Vision Zero Road Safety Action, this is where everything generally is. This is where, as committee members, this is the location to come and find what the city is doing. And so you can scroll down here. There's a bunch of stuff about our Road Safety Action Plan, how it got submitted and everything like that. Plan overview, and you get in here, and this is our high injury network to HIN. So you can click there. It's going to take you to this. You can just cancel that aspect. If you have ArcGIS, well, close it out. If you have it on your machine, then it can load potentially a little bit different. You scroll down here, it talks about it. This kind of shows all the collisions. You want to keep scrolling down to where you get to the map that has this here, kind of these orange lines and dots. And what this is really what we call the HIN, the Higher Injury Network. I'm going to expand here so that you can see the map. And so this is really looking at where on our roadways do we have the most people getting killed and seriously injured. So the dots here, so if I zoom in an area here, you can see there's dots that represent specifically the intersections. The lines represent kind of the segments. And what this is, we looked at, it's a whole bunch of statistics and whatnot, but we looked at everything and said, hey, these are the locations that are the highest amount throughout. So really, it's not, if you think about the whole city, and the city is, well, I went out just a bit too far. So the city is very huge. You can see here the boundaries of the city. The city is roughly 5,000 square miles. We're one of the largest cities in the United States. We have roughly 5,000 miles of roadway. Obviously, we're not having people killed and injured everywhere on every section, but there are areas that you can see the concentration. And so that's why, we talked about our high injury network and whatnot, and this is kind of the area where the Safe Streets for All grant that we're applying for is generally in this area. It met a bunch of other criteria as well for it. So want to just show you guys that. So you can come in here, you can zoom into a specific area. So if you're interested, these are the areas where we want to do projects. We've done this big road safety action plan. We've done a lot of data. We want the data to drive our decision making. Because ultimately everybody's passionate and everybody says, well, something happened next to me. We get calls all the time. There was a collision on this place, and people are constantly, hey, what are you going to do about it? And we really want to focus on where is the worst things happening so we can fix these aspects. Hopefully they get fixed. And then as years progress, we'll update the HIN, locations will move. We'll have those collisions come down so that we're always looking at where is the worst locations that we are trying to fix and solve. Okay, so that's for your guys' purpose. If you want to come in, look, give you guys some resources. Again, this Road Safety Action Plan website, this is where nearly all the safety stuff and things that the city is doing, where you guys can come get information, understand what the city is trying to do with these aspects. So now if I can share the presentation again, and hopefully this works. All right, and apparently it started back over. Okay, so a little bit more about the hint. So again, that was the map. So in the intersections itself, so we divided the intersections into 2 tiers, because ultimately there's another tier, but you have so many intersections, there's only so much that we can focus on at a time. We're a very big city, like I said, there are 1,200 roughly signalized intersections throughout the city. So if you think about it, if we rebuild 1 signal a year, it's going to take us an awful lot of years to be able to fix the signal, and the oldest signal is going to be very old. Even if we rebuild 10 signals, it's going to take us a long time for that. So with this here, there's 25 intersections that are really our signalized intersections. So where there's a signal, where the highest number of KSI crashes are. So they range anywhere from 8 to 14 crashes in the 5-year period. And then there's segments as well. And so really we talk about that 5,000 miles, 8.1 miles is where the majority of people are really getting killed and seriously injured. And so that's where we want to fix those locations. Now, compared to the signals, obviously it's the 2 of them together that we need to work on and whatnot. And so that's some information there regarding the segments as well. So here's some detail to share with you guys, and I'll pause here a bit. So this is really a list of the highest ranked intersections itself. And sorry, it is probably a little bit small on the screen for this. But here we have, if it's got an asterisk like here, that means there's some kind of project that's underway in design or in construction aspects. A lot of these projects were underway well before we established the HIN, because obviously we're working on safety stuff before. And some of these projects are projects specifically after we've implemented the Road Safety Action Plan. We kind of said, hey, what are our biggest projects? What do we need to work on? And then it also identifies a couple of projects that have recently been completed. So 75th and Indian School, for example, is recently completed. Now, it will take, because we look at 5 years of data for our collision aspects, oftentimes it takes a couple years for some of these projects to ultimately fall off of these top lists. MAG has a list that's called the top 100 highest or crash risk factor. I'm saying it quite wrong, but it's basically where it's the highest risk potentially. So MAG looks at the whole, MAG is the Maricopa Association of Governments. So they look at the whole Maricopa County area and citywide and on all the cities and say, hey, where is the highest collision? We had a signalized intersection several years ago that was number 3 on the list. We ended up rebuilding the signal with all the new things, and I'll go into detail here in a bit, some of the signal stuff we do. And we saw that one, the next year it ranked down in the 20s or so, and the next year it ranked down in the 30s or so, and the next year it ranked down in the 80s or so. So you will see it drop off, but because we're looking at 5 years of data, you're not going to see, hey, we rebuilt 75th and Indian School and it drops right off the next year because of how the data looks at and whatnot. So a lot of these we are doing things at, and most of the time we are trying to rebuild the signal. The signal more often is old, and I'll go into in a minute how that kind of plays into and what we do and how the engineering kind of improves the safety of the intersection. So that's that component. And then here is our highest ranked segment. Now the segments, it's a little harder because it's a much bigger project to truly take an entire segment and say, look, this is what we're going to do and fix. We talked about that section on Indian School Road. It's roughly 25 million potentially do that. And depending on who you talk to, that may not be doing everything that could potentially make that road 100% safe. Well, honestly, you get rid of all the traffic. That's probably the only way it's 100% safe, which isn't feasible by any means. So oftentimes these are really a lot of our killed and seriously injured are pedestrians that are trying to cross streets, oftentimes major arterial streets. And so oftentimes the ones here that have some project underway, such as 7th Street, I think here, so our Indian School, 7th to 10th, Glendale, oftentimes there's a hawk that we have planned in that segment. Now, again, a hawk is a one point that we're going to put in a traffic signal. It's called a hawk, or a high intensity activated crosswalk. And that is a way that traffic will stop when someone wants to cross the street. They can push a button. They have extreme safety benefits from an engineering standpoint. And again, that solves maybe that location, the whole segment, not necessarily. So a lot of these that show we're doing something, it doesn't say that, hey, we're doing something the entire segment from end to end for that. So now I want to talk a little bit. So this was a recent completed project, 75th Avenue and Indian School. So a lot of people are like, why are all you guys doing is implementing upgraded signals? Because that's one of the biggest things from a safety standpoint that we can do. Oftentimes our signal infrastructure is upwards of 30 or so years old, and technology has changed. Engineering standards have changed. So you can see here we have an older picture of this signal arm here, and then we have a picture of the newer one. So some of the things that we do, we oftentimes are moving to what's called a flashing yellow arrow. And many times you guys have seen that. It's where it will provide a green arrow for a section, then it will turn everything red, and then after a couple of seconds, it will start flashing a yellow arrow to allow what we call as engineers a permissive turn. So yes, you can turn, but you need to watch for the oncoming traffic to make sure that you're clear. This has a safety benefit. In general, the engineering terms, I can't remember the exact number, but I think it improves collisions by like 30% roughly, and don't quote me, it's been a while since I've looked that up. But what that does is it allows more people to understand, hey, I go here, it stops the traffic, and then it lets other people go. The other advantage is oftentimes we will omit the flashing during, say, a major, commute hours or something like that. Because during major commute, there's not really a gap. The traffic's so heavy, and so then you get traffic sitting there and they're waiting, and the longer people wait, the shorter that gap that they would accept a safe turn is. And so what we do is oftentimes we'll eliminate that, and that will help improve the safety. Another thing we do is we add more. You can see here there was one traffic signal head for 3 lanes ultimately. Here we have a lane or a head over every lane. That's something that's shown to increase. You can't see it in this picture, but more often we are installing additional street lighting at the intersection. Previous standards, you'd only have one light over this side. So the other side, and again, it's off the picture, we now install a light so that it's also on this one here. So generally speaking, then there's now 8 street lights and not just 4 at a corner to highlight that crosswalk area. So it's more illuminated. So especially at night, pedestrians are more visible, people can see the intersection better, things of that nature. And so oftentimes those are some of the greatest safety benefits that we can see, because most of our collisions happen at signalized intersections. In fact, we tell people in general, if you install a 4-way stop, the collisions actually go up. Most of the time when you install a signal, the collisions go up. And a lot of people say, but you're installing all this safety features. We are, but when we do that, we're also doing that because there's just more traffic in the area. And that's one of the reasons you need to provide these safety mechanisms so that you can identify who has the right of way at locations. So, all right. So then the next thing, yeah.
And maybe, I guess I can hold my questions to the end, but I just wanted to ask you a question that involved the last photo. So I thought maybe it'd be easier to ask you now.
Sure. Not a problem.
I see the change, and it seems to be very car driver focused, and the benefits and the improvements. I don't see anything for a cyclist to make it safer. I don't see a bike lane in there. I don't see anything for a pedestrian. And actually, the pedestrian crosswalk there, this looks to be unchanged. I mean, in terms of the lines, sidewalk is still right on the street, which is very uncomfortable. It's not a detached sidewalk. It's not a wider sidewalk. And the only change that I see to the sidewalk actually is an impediment there, which is that the new, sign thing, the new signal, I guess, holder is actually took up the sidewalk space where we used to have more space there for pedestrians. So, on each of these intersections, is there anything being done to provide, from a pedestrian, from a cyclist standpoint, if we have more comfort, shade, anything for pedestrians here, or is it just, kind of more car focused?
Yes, excellent question. Thank you, or Vice Chair Hermes. So some of the things, so the lighting that I talked about is a pedestrian enhancement because it increases the lighting around. Whenever you build the new signal, we upgrade all the pedestrian push buttons to the newer standard. So a newer standard push button is called an APS. I can't remember what that stands for. But what it is it improves the push button to make it ADA accessible for visually impaired and everything on that method. Whenever we do this, the new controller now has more optimization. It increases the detection. So now the detection, if there is bike lanes in the area, will detect the bike where the older signals typically would not detect the bike. Obviously, this is a traffic signal upgrade, so we're not looking to add bike lanes where there isn't, because oftentimes there's not necessarily the space. That takes other things than just upgrading the signal. Somebody had mentioned earlier the potential of LPIs, or a leading pedestrian interval. That allows the potential for a pedestrian to push the button, and they actually get a little bit more of a walk time, so they're out in the road before potentially the green light comes on for the traffic. The older controllers don't have the capability to operate that method. The older controllers were built on technology that couldn't do that. And so that allows that to be a potential implementation. And we'll talk more about pedestrian or leading pedestrians in a different time. We have some more things to share. We're slowly running out of time in this meeting.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Carl. Just a quick follow-up on that. I can't help myself. So is this intersection, does that have LPI? Because now there's a new and upgraded. Is that happening right now if I were to go there?
I don't know if it is at this point, at this
Carl,
location.
We aren't putting LPI in at this time. We are doing the study with NAU as to where it is appropriate to put it in and for them to give us policy change on LPI. We have done it at a number of intersections downtown, but it's on a one-to-one basis. It doesn't mean that we won't consider it or that we can't consider it at these intersections, but we wanted to see the value of it, and so there is a study through NAU to give us the results of the value of doing it and where to do it.
What's the timing on that study?
I believe it's due to be completed by the end of the year. It just recently started.
And last comment, and then I'll let you move forward, or with any other questions, Carl. And this is just a comment. Please, to the all possible and every manner possible, please don't put more impediments in the sidewalks. And even if you got an eminent domain something, or take that bush out, it becomes very difficult for especially our folks pushing walkers and wheelchairs to have more impediments in our sidewalks. There's so many impediments in our sidewalks already. So with that stop, Carl, back to you.
Not a problem. And to answer that, that's actually one of the things we look at very closely is the relationship of the ramp with the pole and the push button. There's a lot of ADA standards to allow for a wheelchair to get by. So it does require 4-foot path around that pole. You do require a 4-foot square area so a wheelchair can get right up against that pole. So while it might look like that's potentially more in the sidewalk and more in the way, it actually meets all the ADA requirements and kind of safety standards more so than it did before.
Mr. Vice Chairman, I saw several hands raised. I know.
Oh, go ahead. I don't see the hand myself, but I see you there, James. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, the high injury network is great, and it does identify where the accidents are happening and even the type, whether it's a vehicle, pedestrian, vehicle, bicycle, or otherwise. So it's giving us the where, but it's really not giving us the whole story, the why. Uh, I'm retired now, but in my previous job, I used to do a lot of safety investigations post-accident, where we would delve into, do a deep dive into the root cause of the accident. And I don't know if the city has done any studies on this. I know police reports will generally try to put a cause in the report, but a compilation of what is actually causing these accidents at these locations would be important for both any task force to come up with projects, and for us as the committee to be able to provide our advice on that. You know, there's things like what's the root cause? Was it a failure to stop for a red? DUI, is that a factor? Speed, is it a factor? Is the pedestrian at fault? Is the bicyclist at fault? I know the kind of emphasis on this whole thing is the target is the motorist as being the villain in most of these cases, but that's not always the case. And the information we have here, it's not showing that. Is there a way, or has the city already done some kind of an analysis on this type of thing?
So yes, we do look into those type of things, and kind of all of the gamut is true. And not in every collision can you truly identify a why. Most everything that you can say is because of some kind of user error. Now, the user error could be on the pedestrian, it could be on the vehicle, it could be on the bike, it could be on anyone, but generally speaking, that's what it is. We do a lot of what's called a road safety assessment at some of these locations, where an independent engineering firm goes out. They actually hire a lot of human factors experts to kind of look at what is the human factor expert and reason behind it. You know, one example that was shared once in a meeting, you know, that again, you only get if you dive very much into, there was a pedestrian that was running after a bus and got ran over by the bus. You know, and you might say, oh, well, why was the pedestrian doing that? Well, the human factors aspect was able to find out after the case, it was the last bus in the day that the person did. They'd missed the bus the day before at the location. They were right there with the bus. They actually ran up and started banging on the bus and ended up slipping under a tire, unfortunately. You know, but when you start and look back, you can see all those different reasons. Now, how can the city solve that individual one? It's difficult. You know, there are things we can do. We can provide more buses. We can provide more timing. But all of those things come into, you know, it's not as easy as saying, yeah, just do that. And that's one collision. And so we do look at a lot of those things. I'm sure in future aspects we can share some of that data more with you guys. But it's not always a one-to-one, and you can't always answer that question.
I see a couple hands up. Dan, I got you first, and then I'm going to go to Mike, and then I'm going to go to Jay. Go ahead, Dan.
Thank you. So, a couple of things. First thing is, you know, you mentioned, you know, human factors and error. You know, what's the root cause? I mean, sometimes it just boils down to bad planning, bad engineering. You know, like this particular intersection here. I mean, that light pole, I mean, compared to what I've seen out here in Levine, that's pretty far off. I mean, so not every intersection has those clearances, meets those ADA requirements. I mean, I'm curious, what is a light, you know, a signal improvement like this cost? And then for the city to put that in and not even restripe the lanes or restripe the crosswalks. I mean, you want to make the area more visible with the lights, but you know, at the most basic level, restriping the crosswalk would be a huge visibility improvement. That's just one thing. The other thing, you know, making accommodations for, you know, you can always reduce the speed limits, you know, do road diets. Slower speeds always, you know, and slower moving car reduce, you know, is a less impactful crash, if, or avoids a crash altogether. And especially if you've got an SUV, that pedestrian, if they're in the crosswalk, God forbid, they're gonna experience like a 15% more severe injury because of they got hit by an SUV or something that's flat faced on the front. So we need to do more to protect the pedestrians, because it might come down to there might be a human error element, but it also comes down to how well are our streets designed, and quite frankly, they're not in Phoenix. It's not good. It's then so, and then James had mentioned something about the high injury network. I noticed that there, from the information that's been plotted on the chart there, there seems to be a large amount of data that's missing from the Levine area. In 2019, 2020, Levine had the Levine South Mountain Transportation Study, which was commissioned by the city and MAG. And between 2013 and 2017, there was almost 2,500 vehicle crashes. And those seem to be, largely, the years are off, but some of those overlap. I mean, they seem to be missing in the Levine area. I mean, so I'm curious to know how, if there's more recent data that can be added to this map, because from my experience, I mean, there's crashes out here every day. I mean, you're every time you're riding a bike, it's just not safe to ride your bike and on an arterial anywhere. So we need to make sure that those are that is a safe, comfortable environment, and I would like to know what the most updated data reflects for Levine area or District 7 overall, because we're spending a lot of money to make these improvements, and I'd hate to hate for it all to be for nothing if it's not really, if it's just making, if it's a half measure, when there's, just, a small incremental increase in the funding for that particular could, offer a much more, robust solution that makes it safer for, the, people out on the roads, whether the pedestrians or in a car or whatever. Those were just my couple of comments on that. Thank you for.
Yep. So thank you for the comment, Committee Member Penton, I believe. Sorry.
Yes.
So one item on that. So again, this is talking about our seriously injured and killed. This is our HIN, our high injury network. We're not talking about all the other collisions out there. Phoenix currently experiences approximately 30,000 collisions a year throughout the city. Okay, that is not shown on these maps. We are specifically looking at the killed and seriously injured. So the vast majority of the collisions, and if you can recall from last time we talked about the overall, the vast majority are just collisions, where it might be property damage only, there might be a minor injury or something of that nature. And that's by far the majority, and cars overall today have a lot of safety measures to them. So a lot of people are really like, oh, did you hear this collision that happened down here and it blocked traffic and it did this forever? And that might be a property damage only, and the people don't even need to go to the hospital. And that's great. Now, it still impacts everybody, and we see that and do that. So again, there are 30,000 collisions throughout the year. Our road safety action plan cannot remove all collisions. Our goal is to remove the killed and seriously injured collisions. So we're trying to do our best to say, hey, what are the collisions that are the highest impact? What's happening? How do we fix them? A lot of them are your vulnerable users, your bike and your pedestrian, because more often they aren't walking around with a giant metal bubble around them with a bunch of safety features on them. And those are things that we're constantly looking at. And I don't know if there's more questions, but some of your questions as to what are we doing next and what about additional data, that's my next slide.
Okay, well, let's go to Mike. I know Mike's been patient. Go ahead, Mike.
Just quickly to respond to James's question, a couple of years ago, myself and several of my colleagues at ASU did exactly that kind of a study looking at fatal pedestrian crashes in Phoenix. And we did that dive and looked at all of the crashes and looked for those causes. So that report is available. I'll be happy to share it with the committee if anybody is interested.
That would be great. And I promised I'd go to Jay next, and I see Rosa's hand up after that. Jay?
Thank you. So I try to be very quick because I see we're limited on time here. Just in general, if I could just kind of sum up what I think I'm hearing from this presentation and the high injury network, which is that you're looking at places where there's a high level of killed and seriously injured, and you're going out there and you're looking, like, if you're saying that if there's a high number there, we probably have an engineering problem, and we need to fix that engineering problem. That engineering problem may result in sort of forced errors for the user, so it kind of forces user error, but you're out there looking and saying, you know, what are the engineering fixes that we can do? Because if we have let's say an intersection with a high number of fatal crashes, we probably have an engineering problem at that intersection as opposed to another intersection maybe down the street where we don't have as many crashes. Am I understanding the way you're approaching this correctly?
Yes, that's correct. And again, the solution is not always engineering. Most of the time we find these locations are where our traffic signals are relatively old. They don't have all the new things that newer traffic signals have, the updated lights, the additional data, the higher controller that can be smarter at what it sees and knows how to fix things. So yes, that's oftentimes what we're doing. And again, that's what streets can do. We have a whole education component that we're doing. Police have enforcement components. We talked earlier today, council is asking us to look closer at automated enforcement and options with that. So, you know, engineering is not the only solution out there. And as an engineer, I will admit, there's no way only engineers can solve this problem. We will not get to zero with only engineers.
Rosa, go ahead. Oh, you're on mute.
Okay. The best news that I heard today is the Indian School Corridor, because I've been driving that for over 20 years. And I believe that I'm the one who witnessed all kind of crashes. I mean, I'm serious. And maybe the 75th Avenue is not the perfection, but believe me, there is a huge difference between before and after. Supermoms did these studies for many, many years. So we have data from U of A, we got data for ASU, and from City of Phoenix, a police department, and we put that together. And that's how 75th Avenue was the #1 in collisions. I mean, that was every day, in the morning, afternoon, morning, every day, the helicopter. And then I appreciate all this job that you have done, but we're humans. There is no such a perfection. But on behalf of the community, I mean, we're really grateful. And if we can do something more for the rest of Indian School, I mean, I'm the one, you know, let me know what to do. I have the data, I have a presentation, I have a PowerPoint with the Stray Supermom that we put everything together, because this is serious. So many injuries, and there is a lot of things that we can do, but so far it is a big difference between before and after the improvement at 75th Avenue. That's all I have to say.
Thank you for the comment. We appreciate it. We're glad it's helping.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Rosa. And to that, I know you're about to submit the grant, but I know sometimes in the past I've had the streets department reach out to me as a neighborhood association president, saying, "Hey, can you sign this letter? Can you put a letter in support of this grant that we're going to use to try to, you know, improve street safety?" Happy to do that. I'm sure people on this committee would be thrilled at the opportunity to do that, to support the grant to make that part of Indian School safer. So just put that out there in case you need anything from us or anything we can do to help.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah.
Carl, I don't see any other questions, Carl, so I'm going to kick it back. Sorry, Joe. Joe, go ahead. I think you're on mute, Joe.
Sorry about that. I don't want to prolong this conversation, Mr. Vice Chairman, but Carl, can you bring that, I'll try to make it brief. Can you bring that photo back up again of this 75th? And, you know, what I noticed about that is not necessarily the intersection, but I'm looking half a block down where 3 lanes become 2 lanes. And I wonder to what degree some of the study and research and data that you have identifies these troubled intersections where there are, you know, major changes in the lanes that I know just instinctively would cause folks to speed up because they're going to try to get in front of one car versus another. And, you know, it just makes the intersection that much more hazardous because something is happening a half a block away.
Excellent question. So one of the things to talk about that is oftentimes in Phoenix, we did build historically what's called a flared intersection from our aspect. So as you would approach an intersection, it would flare out to provide oftentimes additional lanes that could potentially go through the traffic signal so that further on people could merge over it. More often, and it's more with striping projects now, we are taking that and typically making that a right turn lane. And then the future, you know, the lane that you see here further on, it becomes a bus storage lane only. Because oftentimes the majority of the traffic is turning right. Not always. We look at it and we kind of say, hey, what do we do here? But that's the majority of the time what's happening. Again, we look at pavement projects and what's happening with new pavement projects, because that's an opportunity to, we don't have to go out and ablit a lot of the striping that's out there, and we can just put down the new striping because, you know, new pavement is basically a blank blackboard for us to be able to put new lines on. That is something that we're doing here. I don't remember at all if that was something that's coming here or when it would, but that is a strategy that we are using more and more throughout the city.
Good. Thank you.
Got it. Okay, now I don't see any other questions. Carl, going to kick it back to you. I think you have more presentation.
Yes, there's just a little bit more. Okay, so now kind of the next phases. So as we pointed out, the HIN data is 2016 to 2020 because that was the most updated data that we had at this point in time. So we are getting new crash data. We're hoping to have it here in about a month, maybe 2. So what happens is crash data, police go out, they do all the reports and whatnot. Police data needs to be sent to ADOT. And this is true for the whole state. Everybody sends data to ADOT. And oftentimes the police reports, especially if it's a fatality report, can take a while before everything's finalized. Because sometimes it might turn into a fatal 30 days after the collision, because the person might go to the hospital, be in the hospital for a month or so, and then ultimately, due to the injuries, they may end up passing away. And so that data takes a while to get to ADOT. ADOT does a scrubbing type process to it. We've had several conversations with ADOT to say, hey, can you fix this? Can it go faster? And this is kind of true nationwide. So oftentimes the data is kind of old. So we'll have official data for 2022. Typically it comes sometime in July, depending on ADOT staffing. Sometimes it's more towards September. So as we get that data, what we're looking to do is we're going to then update this HIN. So the HIN right now has all these dots and maps. What we're going to do is we're going to look at the new 5-year data. So it will now be 2018 to 2022 data. We'll look to see that, see what changes happen on the HIN, update the actual HIN. We're right now working with a consultant to have, we do a lot of scrubbing type processes. So when it comes to us, there's different things that we look at and things. And that process typically takes 9 weeks plus. We're in the process right now to have a consultant do that. And it's going to change about 40% of our data overall through here. And again, we're talking approximately 30,000 collisions a year throughout Phoenix. So with that, once that process is through, I anticipate that we'll be coming back to share with you guys a new updated HIN. And then from there, priorities potentially change. We can look at the HIN and say, hey, where do we need to be focusing our efforts at that time? And I think that's where a lot of stuff is going to come back to the advisory committee to share with you guys, here's the updated data, here's what we have, where do we want to spend our efforts and times and the limited funding budget that we have. So that's kind of what's coming. At the moment, this is what we have. And again, this will be a process roughly we want to do every 2 years because things will change. And hopefully the goal is that by 2050, we are making progress to where our serious and fatal are zero. You know, right now we have on average about almost 200 fatalities a year on Phoenix Street. And approximately half of those are pedestrians today, is what the data says. And so that's the biggest number that we're really trying to change through rebuilding roadways, through educating the general population, through enforcement efforts to get people to obey the traffic and what we have. So, and I think that's basically the end of the presentation. So any additional questions, comments, or things that we can answer? And I'll go ahead and close this out so that you guys can see any hands raised.
Oh, I thank you. I see Julian, go ahead.
Thank you for the detailed presentation. My question is regarding, let me see what's the best way to put this question forward. Are you, for the data being collected, we know that during the summer it gets really hot and there's deaths due to the heat. Is this data that's being collected since it relates to pedestrians being out and is that data being counted for those deaths? And I have a follow-up question.
Yeah, no, excellent question. That information is not in this. This is specifically looking at roadway aspects and traffic. And so, no, we don't have that. This is just data due to collisions or fatalities on the roadway. So pedestrian data we have is only when a pedestrian is hit by a motor vehicle.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, go ahead, Jay.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry, I just have to follow up on my question before because I kind of feel like I didn't quite get the answer that I that I had asked. So sorry, Carl. But I was really asking. I mean, you kind of talked about like enforcement and you know engineering isn't going to fix everything. Of course not. My question was really towards if something's concentrated in an area, okay. Do you feel as though that likely means there's something that needs to be fixed out there? I mean, because it seems like we're looking at the high injury network and we're saying, okay, there's a cluster here, okay, and necessarily scofflaws may not cluster, okay, so if we have a cluster here, there's probably something we can do on the street to make it better, safer, whether it's compliance or whatever, that there's something we can do that improves the engineering. And by engineering, I do mean like signals, signal time, like that's all engineering.
So yes, that's why we look at the high injury networks. So sorry if I didn't answer that one correctly before. But yes, that's kind of why we're doing this. We're saying where are the fatals and serious injuries clustering. We take a deep dive to look at it and hopefully identify what are the countermeasures that we can produce there to improve the collisions that are, or remove, I should say, the collisions that are taking place.
Thank you. Thanks for the clarification. I appreciate it.
Okay, Dan, go ahead.
So to kind of like touch on that point as well. So once you've identified, say, you know, there's an area or cluster, and you've identified those, you know, engineering improvements that can be, or the solutions that can be implemented, wouldn't it be, you know, what, to me, my logic would say, okay, we're going to take these these new improvements to prevent that, you know, eliminate that cluster, that you know, intersection. We're just going to build from now on. We're just going to design the streets so they incorporate those improvements. So that way, you know, incrementally, all the streets are being improved to that level of safety and those improvements, and thereby, you know, avoiding a recurrence of some other, you know, hotspot that, you know, the ship might pop up. It's going to be avoided. It's you know, if that's the way if we make those changes, fundamentally going forward, as it's built out.
So excellent question. And yes, that is what we're doing. So for example, standards today do have that higher aspect to it. So we are, as we look at new roads, we're putting bike lanes in, we're putting buffers on the bike lanes. As we build new traffic signals, we're building them to these upgraded newer standards. Now, we can't do that to a traffic signal that was built 30 some odd years ago, whatnot, and so, we're always going to have the old and the new, and we're obviously trying to do that. And 10, 15 years down the road, there's going to be some different technology standard that says, oh, this is now an improved safety that we just don't know about today. And that's just kind of the cycle that we're doing. And our goal is by 2050, we've figured out enough of this cycle that we're down to zero is ultimately the goal that we want to work to.
So, okay, thank you. But isn't there an opportunity every time we do resurface or we repave a street, or there's always an opportunity there to make those modifications, to the way it's designed,
Yep.
since the
So
street has to be
excellent
improved anyway?
question. Yeah, so excellent question. When we're repaving the roadway, there's obviously a budget to repave that roadway. Whenever we repave the roadway, we're also looking at striping aspects because, like I said, it's kind of a blank blackboard for us to say, is there striping changes? But there's funding for that. There's not funding for necessarily rebuilding a sidewalk. There's not funding for rebuilding a traffic signal. There's not funding necessarily install a median where there wasn't a median before. And so if we wanted to take our maintenance budget that's already very large, I'm sure Kenny could speak more to it, and quadruple it, we could probably do something like that. But where's that funding going to come from?
Mr. Vice Chair, and then remember Penton, what I'll just kind of build onto what Carl's saying a little bit is we would love to be able to detach sidewalks in a lot of the area that's built environment, but detached sidewalks are our typical standard, our current standard for building new roadways where we have development coming in. Street lights being on both sides of the road on our major arterial streets is a current standard, but it wasn't our old standard. So we're always going to be dealing with older infrastructure that we're going to have to do these improvements. But some of those times the budget allows us to address them, but others, for example, where we have overhead power lines and power lines in there that cause obstructions in the sidewalk, those become cost prohibitive to be able to address with a single project a lot of the times. We could use our $10 million budget for the entire city on one of those projects alone just to get rid of the utility infrastructure. So we have to pick and choose, and part of using the HIN to be able to target our investments is to make them go farther to be able to save the most lives possible, because the shotgun approach to saying we're going to put a little bit all the way around here isn't going to get us to where we need to from a Vision Zero perspective. But by targeting these where we have these locations on the HIN or corridors on the HIN, will get us closer, and hopefully those investments will have better dividends in saving people's lives.
Joe, go ahead.
Can I ask I hope it's a direct question that can get a direct answer. In prioritizing these intersections, are the district lines of city council districts in any way used, or is it simply a citywide priority list based on the hazards of the identified intersections?
So I'll take that one, so Carl doesn't have an answer. No, when we are implementing these projects, we are using the high entry network. So regardless of council district boundaries.
Good enough for me. Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other questions for Carl. Carl, thank you so much. I appreciate all of your time.
So Vice Chair Hermes, one thing, sorry, I meant to mention before we get off of Carl's item, the reason why we wanted to present on the high entry network was a couple of things. Was to provide an introductory, an idea of what this is, and give the community members a chance to be able to explore on their own the high entry network. One of the things that I would like to be able to propose to this committee, and to see if this is an idea, because it was from what we heard from the first meeting, and we're hearing a lot in this meeting, is the idea this committee wants to be involved in defining and identifying solutions. So the thought that my staff and I had was we were, between the last meeting and this meeting, as we were contemplating this, is is this something the committee would like to do, is to look at, potentially we have $10 million budgeted for the road safety, implementation on an annual basis. I would like to be able to propose that maybe the committee would like, if you're interested in, is maybe select an intersection or a road corridor on the HIN that this group could potentially, if we're able to form those subcommittees, to be able to dive into, be able to look at the data, look at the causality, and help us, focus on a project on one area of the HIN, so that you have an opportunity to be able to dig into the weeds on those kind of things, on those projects. Because as we implement these things, these things across the entire city, it may not be feasible or possible for you to get involved in every single one of those sorry. But maybe for one project, it is possible.
Yeah, I say yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think what we've what at least I've been hearing and feeling is we need tangible change to save lives out there. So absolutely, I don't know if you're looking for recommended areas. We talked about Indian School, this other port. I know you've got the grant in for that piece of Indian School, so I'm not sure if that piece is, but there's Indian schools is a mess. Even east of where the grant is, that's one area. And I'd be fine if we wanted to pick a couple. Not trying to. I know there's limited staff resources, and you talked about that already, Keeney. So, but if we're gonna break into subgroups, maybe have a couple. But let me open up other people's thoughts.
Yeah, that'd be a great opportunity. Since they're talking about Indian School. Maybe I propose something like if something a corridor that runs through a couple of villages or a couple of council districts. That way there's more more areas getting that attention. So maybe 51st Avenue, through Maryvale down to Levine, or maybe even over on the the east side, the 48th Street corridor, or something like that, 32nd Street, since they're doing the pedestrian, well, that's over on 3rd Street, but something like that, north-south corridor, because those seem to be pretty.
Rosa? Oh, you're on mute, I think.
Am I on mute?
No, Dan, you're fine. Rosa is.
I'm sorry.
Agree. I know the idea of Indian School is already there, but definitely 67th Avenue and Indian School and 67th Avenue and Thomas, serious scratches with crosses everywhere. After a while they move the crosses because I guess it doesn't look good, but that's my area where I'm driving, taking my girls everywhere, for different sports. And that's what I see really often. And those, Indian School and 67, and, it's a big, it needs to be improved. So that'd be great. And if you want me to get some data, I can, look my resources and look for data. Just let me know.
Well, Keeney, since you brought up the thought and recommendation, did you have an area in mind?
Vice Chair, members of the committee, what I would maybe suggest is the intersection list that Carl provided in his presentation and the corridor list that Carl provided in the presentation. There were ones that are designated with asterisks that we'd already have a project going, or where you have a project that's been completed. We could pare those lists down to intersections and corridors where we don't currently have anything working on, and maybe put that out to the committee as a, hey, select which ones you would like to, and then we could prioritize those and come up, hey, this is the intersection, this is the corridor that the committee has selected, or the majority of the committee has selected. If that's something you'd like to be able to do, we could put that together and independently poll each of the committee members between now and the next meeting.
That sounds great. And I'm seeing some head nods as well. Okay.
Definitely 67 and Thomas.
I'm sorry, can we do a time check?
Yeah, it's 7:10, guys. So I want to keep. I don't know who said time check, but want to be respectful of everybody's time. So I think let's move ahead with that, Keeney, and let's move ahead with the next agenda item. Sound good? Okay.
Sounds good. And Tricia, were you going to have the discussion on actually the meeting schedule?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So in your packet that was emailed to you, you received a meeting schedule, and it's just for the remainder of 2023. So we only have a few dates, being that the meetings will be bi-monthly. We have Thursday, August 17th, Thursday, October 19th, and Thursday, December 14th. All meetings will begin at 5. We hope to, keep them about an hour and a half, ending at 6:30. So we'll all get better at that. And like Keeney mentioned before, we're still working on a location for the hybrid option. So that will be provided to the committee as soon as we figure that out logistically and have that space confirmed.
And Tricia, I know this on the agenda is said, I think, discussion and possible action. Is this something we need to take a vote on?
Yes, we need to approve the proposed schedule that was included in your packet.
Okay, any discussion? Questions or comments? Okay, I'm going to make just one quick comment. I know, and it's kind of covered already. I think there's a lot of energy to do something monthly here, and I think Keeney, I don't want to beat that dead horse, but gave that explanation. I think that having a reduced schedule then makes it really important that we make the best of our time here and do a lot of work in between our meetings. With that, I'll entertain a motion. Any motions out there to approve the meeting schedule?
To approve the meeting schedule as.
Thanks.
Seconded.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, it does pass. Thank you, Tricia. And I think staying with you, Tricia, I think we next have our oh no, I'm sorry. It's request for future agenda items before public comment. So future agenda items. Let me see. So who we got some hands out there for future agenda items? Anyone? Oh, Abby, go ahead.
Yeah, I know I said this last time, but just as a reminder and update on the bike master plan, because it's very important. I just want to put that out there again, because it wasn't on the agenda today. But as a future agenda item, it's very important. Thank you.
So, Vice Chair Armis, I think as I mentioned before, not the comprehensive bicycle master plan, but the evolution of that, which is the active transportation plan, will have a presentation at the August meeting. So we'll have that item covered with August.
And I was going to say that too. I'd love to get an update of how we are doing and filling out that bike master plan connectivity. So hopefully we get an update on that. I saw Jay had a hand up. Go ahead, Jay.
Thanks. So a couple of things. There's something I mentioned. It was actually in the minutes, so I don't know if it's on a future agenda. It had to do with the report back from PD on how they investigate these and how they take a deep dive into determining, what happened in an accident or a collision and whatnot. So I don't know if that's already on an agenda item, but if not, I'd like to throw that out there. There's obviously the discussion we had about subcommittees, which I'm assuming is going to get brought back at the next one. Now, does that mean that we have to, if we said, yeah, we can do it and whatever, then we have to agendize for the future another, like, how do we get them started quicker than having to wait like three more meetings or whatever? I just want to throw one other thing out there, and then I just like to answer that. And then there was a mention of a speed limit study, and I really would like a report on what that is and who's doing what and where we are with that.
Anything else? Anybody else? Okay, seeing no other hands, we're going to move on to our next. I hope Tricia didn't go too far. Is call to the public or public comment. And Tricia, I don't know how it works. I don't see the comment deal, this meeting, kind of the chat bar, but is it something that you need to do technologically to unmute someone to folks to talk?
Correct. We have Nicole Rodriguez registered to speak, and I unmuted her now, so she can go ahead and start whenever you are ready.
Thank you.
Tricia. And thank you, committee members and staff. Listening in today's meeting, it's really being overcomplicated way more than it should be by staff from these reports we received. And it's taking something simple and well-researched, such as with speed studies and the LPIs, and it's already been well-researched, and we're just belaboring the issue with some dog and pony show of onboarding ASU to parade around another study that tells us the same thing as before. There's no debating the data. And as we have seen with this 75th Avenue and Indian School example, I thought that it was a very poor job. What I heard was a bunch of distractions, window dressing, lipstick on a pig. I mean, in fact, this pig ate the lipstick. And speaking of which, we do have PD on here today, and I'm still curious if the police department is actually citing people who are occupying and parking in bike lanes, because this is a real continuous issue that we are making so many reports about, but we're not seeing any follow through. And that concludes my comments. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Nicole. Tricia, do we have anyone else who's requested to speak in the public comment section?
No, I have no one else that registered.
Okay. Let's see. And that's it. We are adjourned at 7:16. Thank you all for your service. Have a great rest of your night.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Oh, before can we get a copy of the presentation sent out to all the committee members, please? And the public if they need it?
Yes, I'll get that out to you guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.